Hi, welcome back to the second part of Bruce Telfer's testimony. In the first part, we heard about how Bruce was brought up in New Zealand and rejected God, then travelled around the world looking for meaning in life until that moment many years later when he was led to his brother's place. There he discovered the great controversy and desire of ages, which changed his life. In all his wanderings, God never left him alone, but was always sending people to witness to him. In this next part, we will be talking to Bruce about what happened after his conversion. So Bruce, tell us about what happened after your conversion.
Well, Julia, I took these books, which I found in my brother's house, and I took a Bible for the first time in my life, and I flew off to live in Germany for 2 years. And while I was there, in the little town of Rüsselsheim, I found a little Adventist church. And in this Adventist church, I found a brochure which was advertising a evangelistic series by an American evangelist in the neighboring town. And so I decided to go along, and I listened to every presentation, and he went systematically through the Bible on all major points of interest and doctrines. And at the end of it, I decided I wanted to be baptized. So I was. And after I was baptized, a young man who belonged to this church came knocking on my door, and he said to me, "Come with me, we're going to start a Teestube." That's German for a tea house, or it's like a youth club. It was something they were doing in Germany at this time. This is in the 1970s, and late 1970s. And so he and we renovated the basement of the church and created a sort of a youth atmosphere there. And we invited the young people to come along. And he went off to study medicine in France and left me in charge. Oh. And I could barely speak German. I couldn't even speak German. But young people started coming, and for some reason they had all sorts of interesting questions, and I was trying to answer them, and I was trying to speak in my gebrochene Deutsch, which means broken German, and they were nodding their heads and go. And believe it or not, a few people were baptized. But I also became a colporteur, a literature evangelist in Germany, the same as that guy who came to visit me my family, and did the study on Daniel 2. And that was an interesting experience because, again, I was trying to sell books in a language I couldn't really speak properly. But I earned enough money to go to a college in England, which was Seventh-day Adventist training to become a minister. And I was so enthusiastic about this Teestube thing, this youth club thing that I learnt in Germany. I suggested to some of the students there that we should do the same for the local people in the local town, for the youth there. And so one day we were in the town, we were handing out invitations to come to our club. And I was walking along the street, and in front of me were all these skinheads, and with their big boots on, and they looked rather intimidating. So I crossed over to the other side of the street. And when I looked back, I saw that there was all these skinheads were surrounding somebody, and this somebody was handing out brochures to be invited to the youth club. And I thought, whoa, that's a brave person. And I saw it was one of the girls from the college. And I thought to myself, I need to marry that girl. And I did.
Very good.
And her name was Vivian, and she happened to be Norwegian. So that's how I ended up living in Norway. And so after we both finished our studies, we moved to Norway. And again, here I was confronted with another language problem. By that time I could speak almost reasonable German, but there wasn't much good in Norway. Even though I was trained to be a minister by this time, I went back to selling books in Norway. And I have to say that this was one of the most amazing experiences I ever had. I just had my faith in God so confirmed by the experiences I had. I'm not sure how many examples I could give you, but one brief one was I knocked on a door, and the door flew open, and this woman said, come in, all enthusiastic. And she said to me, I saw you come into my house in a dream.
Oh, wow.
And I thought to myself, this is interesting, because I had been confronting people in their homes where they were acting strangely, not strangely in a negative way, but in a very positive way. And I have a feeling this happened before with other people, but they didn't actually tell me that they'd seen me in a dream. But this woman did, and it was very encouraging, confirming, that what I was doing was right. Another time I'd come to the end of a road and I'd finished all the houses, and it was a wintry atmosphere. There was snow everywhere, and I was looking forward to going home because it was cold. But the people said to me, there's another house down there, you can't see it, but you might like to know there's one more house. And I thought about this, and I don't want to go down there because I can't even see the house, and all I could see is snow, and because the driveway was covered in snow. But I had promised the Lord that I would go to every house, and I thought, oh my goodness, I better do it. So when I decided that I was going to go, then the Lord impressed me. You could say he said to me, but it's really an impression. He impressed me to take all my books out of my bag. And I thought, this is crazy. I'm not going to go down there with an empty bag, am I? But the impression was so strong that I did it. I took all the books out of my bag. And this is the interesting thing that I've learned about God. He leads one step at a time. He does, yes. And if you're willing to take that step, he'll show you what the next step is. So after I'd emptied my bag, he said, now I want you to put those books in your bag. And those books were a set of 4 books about the life of Christ. And they're quite heavy, big hardbound books. And I didn't usually carry them around with me because they were my reserve books in case somebody wasn't interested. I'd go and get them. Anyway, so I put these books, and off I went, and it was quite a long journey, about at least a kilometre, and I'm wading through the snow, and I'm getting wet, and anyway, I finally end up in the house, and I just take the books out and put them on the table, and the people go, wow! And I thought, well, there's a story here, and yes, they said to me, about a year ago, we saw these books in somebody's house. And we looked at them, and we really, really liked them, and we really wanted them. So we went to many booksellers, bookshops, and we couldn't find them. And there's a reason for that, because they're not sold in bookshops. And so they said, how much are they? They wrote out a check, and off I went. And it's amazing. I would have missed out on that experience if I had refused to go to that house. And those people would have missed out on the books that they desire. And it was just a complete amazing experience, both for me and for them. Absolutely. And I had many, many such experiences like that.
I believe that you had an experience about acquiring a car.
Oh yes, this was after I became a minister. And I'm actually living now in Lapland. It's called Finnmark. It's the northernmost part of Norway, and the next stop is the North Pole. This is well inside the Arctic Circle, where the sun is up 24/7 in the summertime, and where you have no sun at all in the wintertime. And I nearly killed myself on many occasions with this van that I had, because it wasn't suitable for driving in the winter. It's made in Japan, and it wasn't a good car. And I was often stuck in the snow and sliding everywhere. And I managed to survive the first winter, and the next winter I decided I have to do something, or I'm not going to survive the winter. So I wrote a letter to the church saying, can you please lend me some money to buy a car and another car? And for some reason I didn't send the letter, and after a couple of days I ripped it up. And I said to the Lord, if you think I need a new car to work in the wintertime, you have to give me one because I can't afford it. And 2 days later I had a free car, and it was a Volvo. And Volvos are made in Scandinavia and they're designed for the snow.
Oh, how did that happen?
Well, that's an interesting story because I was still selling books at this time. And I went way out, a long way from where I was living, way out onto the coast, and sold some books to a lovely couple out there. And one day, he was a fisherman, and they get paid by how much fish they catch. And he was out in the fishing, and they caught a huge catch, and he earned a lot of money. So they're driving into town, and they're thinking about what they're going to do with this money that they got. And while they're driving, they decide, oh, we think we should get a new car. So they went to the car sales yard, bought a new car, and they wanted to exchange their car for the new one. The salesperson said, nah, it's not worth any money. It's an old car. I don't want that car. So the next thing they do is they go to the supermarket to buy food, and there they meet me. They bump into me, and he's telling me he says, I just bought a new car. Now I've got two, and I don't really need two. Do you need a car? He said to me. And I said, wow, yeah, I certainly do. And you know, the interesting thing is the salesperson thought the car was worthless, but I had it for 3 years. I never spent a penny on repairs on it. It never ever broke down, and it went through the snow like a tractor. So I was very pleased with that, and I had a very amazing time in that part of the world. It's an incredible place, especially in the summertime. It's like magic. But in the wintertime, it's no place for a Kiwi. Living through those winters without the sun, it's just, it's very debilitating. For me it was anyway. And so I started hankering after New Zealand. And I remember I was down by the fjord, and I was throwing stones into the fjord, and I said the same thing to God that I said about the car. I said, Lord, if you want me to go back to New Zealand, then you're going to have to do it, because there's no way I can get back to New Zealand. I had a wife and I had 3 children by this time, and when I left New Zealand, all I had was a rucksack on my back, and I was only, responsible for myself. But now things were different. So I thought to myself, this is impossible. But it's like the car. 2 days later, I got this phone call from somebody in America and said, we want you to come to America to help us with a project that we're doing over here, and we'll send you the money to come over. And I thought, wow. So what we did was, you can't go into America without tickets out of America. And so we bought tickets to New Zealand, one-way tickets to New Zealand, with a stopover for 6 months in America. And so that's how we actually ended up in New Zealand. When we arrived in New Zealand, I became a colporteur, a literary evangelist again. Yeah. And again, I had some very interesting experiences. I'll just tell you one. I was in the street, and I was in a house, and the people said to me, can you get this or that book or something? And so I shot out to the car, and I knew I was going to be only a minute, so I left the back door open. It was a van with a door that lifts up the back. And so I shot back into the house. The minute turned into 5 minutes. I come back out, and I noticed there's a whole bunch of books missing out of the back of my car. And oh no, somebody's stolen my books. So I look around, and I see somebody coming out of their house, and I go over to them and say, look, I've just had some books stolen out of my car. Have you any idea who would do that? And he just pointed at a house. That'll be that house there, he said. And so I thought, that's strange. I already knocked on that house's door, and there was no answer. So I went over, knocked on the door, no answer. Tried the door opens. So I go in the house, go into the hallway and up to the lounge, and there I see a whole bunch of little kids looking at at my Bible friends. You know, they're books for kids. Every page is a picture, and they're very attractive, very colourful. And they were going, whoa, 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 yeah, this is cool. And then I saw the mother lying on the sofa, and she said, and she looked very strange. And then she explained to me, I'm sorry, my kids, you know, they're very naughty. They told me they found the books in the street. She said, I'm actually dying of cancer. That's why she was lying on the sofa. She was very weak. And she said to me, but I want to buy these books because I want my kids to have something about God after I'm gone. And I thought, now that was an amazing experience for me and for them. And it's the kind of experience that just tells me that that God is real, yes. and that He wants us to do this work. He wants us to reach out to people. I often, when I became converted myself, I thought it was going to be so easy to convince other people that that God is true. But then I realized that people were just like me. They're hard-hearted, and sometimes God has to do things to break open those hearts, and who knows, cancer maybe, I don't know, but sometimes God has to put people in the gutter so they look up, you know, and it can be a hard experience for a lot of people, but God wants us to do this work. He wants us to tell people that He is love in spite of the experiences that they have, and that His words do have an effect. If we are willing to speak His words, He says, they will not return to me empty. And that has been my experience all through my life, really, because I've experienced the power of God's words even when I was not a Christian. Yeah. And since returning to New Zealand, I got offered eventually I got a job with the church out in the Pacific Islands. I became the colporteur leader, or literature evangelist leader for the South Pacific. And that was a very nice experience. The people look upon those islands as paradise, and they are. They're a very nice place to live. And my job was to travel around in all of them. And
so you've had quite a range of experiences throughout the world, haven't you?
Yes. But New Zealand's still
home.
You know, my 4 children, and they live in Norway, and they say, when everybody ever asks them, they say, we come from the best 2 countries in the world, Norway and New Zealand.
Right, lovely.
Yeah.
But
no, since I came back from the South Pacific, I've been working in a different way. I've discovered that God can use people in ways that I never thought of. I said to Him a long time ago, Lord, I want to do what You want me to do. I want to say what You want me to say, and I want to go where You want me to go. And since then, that's what I've been doing. And God has sustained me financially and looked after me. And all I can say is that the experience that I've had has just left me mind-boggled about what God can do. But the thing that I realize also is that the experience that I've had is it's almost impossible to transfer into somebody else. It's a bit like having good health and somebody you love has bad health. You can't give them good health. Your good health cannot be passed on to the benefit of their bad health. It's like the 10 virgins. 5 were wise and 5 were foolish. 5 had enough oil and 5 didn't. And when the 5 that didn't have oil asked the ones that had oil, give us, they said, they said, no, we can't. Because what they're really asking is, give us your experience.
Yeah.
And it's not able. People have to experience God for themselves. They need to investigate. They need to. It says knock and it shall be answered. You know, it'll be open to you. But people need to take the initiative. God is there. He's just waiting. And that's been my experience. I've loved it. I often think to myself, what would have happened to me if I had persisted on the way of avoiding God and rejecting God. I think it would have been tragic. But it's turned out to be wonderful. And that's my story.
Wow, what an amazing testimony that Bruce has shared. If you give your life to God, you will experience peace within yourself and see lives changed. I encourage you to do this. Whether you realize it or not, God is chasing you because He loves you. We just need to open our hearts and surrender all that we are and have. You will not be disappointed.